The voyage was delayed by the high seas outside Macushin Bay, so the members of the expedition had a chance to try the local gastronomic delicacy that the Aleutians call pogie, a sort of rock salmon.
I'll have the raw, dries the water in your eyes. Poor man's caviar. Looks terrible.
By Jove, it is terrible.
Yeah, listen, wait, listen. You're all going to be dead jealous of me in a minute.
It's the added sand that makes the difference. Change from the normal food.
Well, at any rate, it was a slight improvement on the expedition's dehydrated food. And after tackling the pogie, they went across to look at the old village church. It had collapsed. Only a few graves stood in the long, overgrown churchyard. The chill waters of the bay lapped against a shore where now few men come. And across the bay soared the strange, impressive pinnacles of the cathedral rocks. They were a challenge the expedition decided to accept. A challenge to brave the riptide that swirls around them. Whirlpools pour through the narrow channels, and the surf pounds furiously on the shore. A mistake here could be fatal. The canoeists felt that they'd entered a wild, secret world. The only way in was on the sea. The gulls roamed, the way of the seals. The expedition dries out after a thorough soaking in the riptides and casts an anxious eye on the sky. It's extremely difficult to judge the weather ahead. The Aleutians are notorious for the speed in which the weather can change. Sudden squalls can spring up and whip the waters into a white frenzy. Not for nothing did the old mariners and seamen call the islands the birthplace of the winds. But there come days when the winds relent and the islands take on a strange, gentle charm. Most people assume that the Aleutians have a true Arctic climate, all ice and snow. This isn't true. Although they're stormy, the Aleutians are blessed with a temperate climate, due in part to the warming Japanese current. There are no trees, but the vegetation grows lustily. The hillsides are splashed in summer with the colors of myriads of wild flowers. There are irises in rich abundance. There are no snakes, no poisonous insects, and the flies only bother when the winds die down, which is seldom. Few human beings come here, so the wildlife seems curiously tame. A red fox seems quite unafraid, although he instinctively keeps his distance. You look at him and remember that the Russians rightly call the islands of the eastern Aleutians the Fox Islands. There had been a long delay at Macushin, so the expedition again defied the weather signs and left in a tumbled sea. Almost immediately, all signs of land disappeared. Ahead, somewhere in the mist, lay the next landmarks, Kashiga and Split Rock, famous in Aleut legend. We fell in with a convoy, a fleet of pilot whales. These are frequent in Aleutian waters, and the early Aleuts relied on them for food. The expedition found them charming and gentle, but somewhat awesome when close. An accidental bump could turn over a kayak and even smash it.
Yes.
Split Rock looms suddenly ahead, a huge hunk of black volcanic material rising boldly from the dark sea. Under its lee, you can see now how low the kayaks lie in the water. The rock is guarded by low reefs, on which the spotted hair seals lie out and watch the strange new intruders with suspicion. In addition to the reefs, the seas around the rock are thick with almost impenetrable kelp. The kayaks have difficulty in forcing their way over it. But the expedition was determined to reach it, for Split Rock is famous in Aleut legend. The Aleuts believed that the Split Rock, with its great cleft and steep walls, was the home of powerful spirits and the temporary refuge for human souls after death. George Peck is in trouble as they force their way across the kelp. During an earlier launching of his kayak, he had injured his right shoulder. The long voyage had aggravated the damage. He was clearly in pain as he approached the shore. But even when the boats touched the shore, it was no easy matter to pull them up. The kelp was thick and slippery and made it difficult even to get a foothold on the land. No wonder the expedition didn't start immediately exploring. Rest and food were essential. Overhead, a magnificent bald-headed eagle patrolled the cold, clear sky. A red-beaked oyster catcher pecked around amongst the boulders. At first it seemed that she'd lost her nest, but she was only trying to decoy the intruders away from it. Aleut legends say that this great rock was split because angry spirits took revenge on an ancient war party. And the eerie atmosphere of the place seemed to weigh on the spirits of the expedition. They were certainly tired after their long days of paddling in the restless sea, but Split Rock is no warm, welcoming haven. In the past it had seen old, unhappy, far-off things. Once a group of Aleut warriors sought refuge here. In 1928, archaeologists found human mummies entombed above the high cliffs. A later expedition, searching atop the western part, discovered 10 skulls lying on the grass in contorted disorder. Possibly sentries from nearby villages, surprised and beheaded by an enemy war party. The expedition felt no inclination to linger in this rather sinister spot, especially with the signs of a storm coming up with the usual Aleutian speed. They set course for the distant Chernovsky harbor, where they would find one of the few areas of human settlement on this bleak coast. For Chernovsky has a sheep ranch, and the chance, about which the expedition had been dreaming for days, the chance of a hot shower. The going becomes rougher. Close into the coast, the surf comes boiling in over the rocks. The kayaks have to be driven hard through endless surf and foam. came safely through the wild sea to reach Chernovsky in the dark. Next day, they explored the ranch. Chernovsky is one of the 3 sheep ranches that have been established in the Aleutians. They're all of them pioneer undertakings, but they've been surprisingly successful, especially when you remember how bleak and stormy the islands are. This ranch covers 198,000 acres and has about 8,000 sheep. The project was briefly interrupted in World War II when the military took over. But now Chernovsky is back in business again. The islands may look bleak, but they provide plenty of grass and water. The winters are mild. The yearly mortality among the sheep is low, and they grow large. The wool equals any produced on the best ranges in Australia. A curious thing, just like the sheep in the Orkneys and in the Hebrides, the Aleutian sheep, when the grass is covered by snow in winter, have learned the trick of coming down to the shore and eating the kelp. It takes about a month each year to collect the sheep from these hills. It seems a little incongruous, but here on this remote Aleutian island, the rancher finds it most convenient to ride out to round up his horses on a motorbike. The horses, anyhow, don't seem to mind. Milt Holmes is a true pioneer, the sort of man who would have been at home in the old Wild West when they were opening it up. He loves the Aleutians with a passion. But he admits that ranching out here isn't easy. Medical help is far away in an emergency. Mail service is frustratingly slow. And because of the lack of transportation, he finds it hard to sell all the mutton his ranch is capable of producing.
Well, it doesn't really.
The expedition took a very welcome chance to relax on Chernovsky Ranch.
It'll stay nice.
The wildlife all around is rich in rarities. The Aleutian bald eagle is still plentiful. He's the American national symbol, but he's becoming rare in the main United States. Here he finds safety on the islands. This eaglet won't grow his white crown and feathers until well into his second year. Several important prehistoric Aleut villages lie around Chernovsky Harbor, and the coastal cliffs are honeycombed with rock shelters and caves. Some of them still contain human burials placed there hundreds of years ago.
Good, go in.
Look in pretty good condition. They've worn smooth and level. So that's absolutely complete.
A cross-section of the cave, as first found, with a bedaka, the early kayak, buried among the bodies.
Right, we'll just pop it back where...
It is against the law to collect such relics, and the expedition put back everything it found. Others have not been so careful. Now one of the most dreaded parts of the voyage was close at hand. This is the Umnak Pass, a savage, narrow stretch of water that separates Unalaska Island from its western neighbor, Umnak. Here the Bering Sea meets the North Pacific, and when the tide changes, powerful currents surge through the narrow pass at 9 knots. It would have been madness to attempt it at full flood tide. The expedition wisely waited for slack tide, when the flow of water is at a minimum. The great body of water lay comparatively quiet, with gently undulating swells. After all the anxious anticipation, the crossing was easy. The expedition breathed a sigh of relief. The kayakists now had ahead of them a prehistoric site of great importance, Shiprock, a protruding hunk of volcanic debris. It stands in the middle of the black waters of Umnak Pass like a sinister, forbidding castle. For the landing on Shiprock, the expedition was joined by Professor Ted Bank. He's the great expert on the Aleutians, and with him came his Aleut companion, Willie Dushkin. They formed 2 groups to explore the island. Shiprock has a strange ghostly feel about it, a place apart, with towering cliffs usually wrapped in mist. Here, prehistory is still present history. In the 1930s, Dr. Alesh Harlishka of the Smithsonian Institute managed to get a party ashore and discovered an archaeological treasure trove. For more than 1,000 years, the Aleuts had brought their honored dead to this sacred place. After Shiprock, the expedition pressed on around the northeastern tip of Umnak Island, battling high winds and rough seas all the way. During one leg of the voyage, they were in their boats for 11 hours without a break. The great curved protection of Inanudak Bay was welcome. Willie Dushkin and Ted Bank reached it first and selected Hot Springs Cove for the camp. Willie, who is from Nikolsky, joined the expedition to represent his people on this historic visit.
Oh, God. I can't take it.
They made camp in an area which was once a great volcano. It exploded, collapsed, and its caldera formed the bay they now occupied. The ground here was still warm from underground volcanic vents, and in the morning a white steam-like mist rose from the sand, giving the impression of a smoking beach. All around was the lush vegetation, a sea of blue-spiked lupins, still wet from the recent rain. The hot springs were only a few hundred yards from the beach, in a beautiful valley through which flowed a cold mountain stream, fed by nearby glaciers. The Aleuts viewed this valley with reverence. They came here to cook in the hot springs and to hold special ceremonies dedicated to the spirits of the nearby volcanoes, the Seshnoi and Visvidov. It seems a paradox. A cold stream from the glaciers and nearby boiling hot springs. Too hot for a bath, but the temptation was too great.